You will be blown away by this story, and no one would have known about it if we hadn't told you about it. Everyone should know what a hero of our time Keanu Reeves is. Imagine walking into a fancy restaurant, one of those high-end places where the chandeliers sparkle, the waiters wear suits, and the menu has no prices. The kind of place where people go to be seen, to celebrate, to indulge. Now imagine you're there, enjoying the ambiance, when suddenly you witness something that makes your blood boil. That's exactly what happened one night when Keanu Reeves was dining at an upscale restaurant in Los Angeles. He was with a few close friends, keeping it low-key as he always does. But then, something happened that changed the entire mood of the evening. At a table near Keanu's, a black man had just walked in. He looked well-dressed, sharp suit, polished shoes, confident posture. He wasn't causing a scene, he wasn't being disruptive. He was just there, like any other customer, hoping to enjoy a meal. But the moment he approached the maitre d', something shifted. The staff exchanged glances. The host's smile faltered. And then came the words that sent a chill through the air. "I'm sorry, sir, but we are fully booked tonight." Now, on the surface, that might seem like a normal response. But here's the thing. Keanu had been in that restaurant long enough to know that there were open tables. He had seen people walk in and get seated without a reservation. So why was this man being turned away? Keanu watched as the man hesitated, confusion flashing across his face. He could tell this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The man nodded politely, turned on his heel, and started to leave. That's when Keanu Reeves did something that made everyone stop in their tracks. It was a Friday night in Los Angeles. The city was alive, pulsing with energy, neon lights reflecting off sleek sports cars rolling through the streets. Inside an exclusive high-end restaurant, Keanu Reeves sat at a dimly lit corner table, quietly enjoying his evening. Unlike many Hollywood celebrities, he wasn't one to demand attention. No entourage, no flashing cameras, just a quiet dinner with friends. The restaurant had an air of exclusivity, a place where the elite dined in peace, shielded from the chaos outside. The maitre d', a tall, thin man in a perfectly pressed suit, was expertly balancing customer service with the subtle art of deciding who belonged and who didn't. And that's when he walked in. The man was in his mid-40s, his posture upright, his presence commanding yet unassuming. He wore a navy blue suit, tailored to perfection, and carried himself with quiet dignity. He walked toward the host stand, a slight smile on his lips, ready to request a table. Keanu, taking a sip of his wine, happened to glance up at just the right moment. He saw the quick flicker of discomfort cross the maitre d's face, the barely perceptible shift in his stance. Something about the man's presence seemed to throw the staff off. Keanu leaned in, slightly listening. "I'm sorry, sir, but we are fully booked tonight," the maitre d' said smoothly. The man blinked, taken aback. He glanced around the restaurant. There were open tables, plenty of them. He hesitated for a brief second before responding in a calm, measured voice. "Oh, I see. Do you take walk-ins at all?" The maitre d's expression didn't change. His tone remained polite, professional, but there was something in his eyes. A flicker of something less welcoming. "Unfortunately, we require reservations in advance," he said, even though Keanu had seen at least 3 other guests walk in without one. Keanu's grip tightened on his glass. He could feel it in his gut. This wasn't about reservations. The man stood there for a moment longer, then gave a small nod as if he had expected this all along. "No problem," he said simply, turning to leave. That. A quiet, dignified exit, the kind that spoke volumes without saying a word. But Keanu wasn't about to let that be the end of it. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished floor, and stood up. The conversation at his table hushed as his friends turned to see what he was doing. He didn't hesitate. With long, purposeful strides, he walked straight toward the maitre d'. The restaurant was already watching. Now they were holding their breath. Keanu Reeves was about to make sure everyone in that room knew exactly what was happening. Keanu Reeves stood in front of the maitre d', his piercing gaze locking onto the man's face. The restaurant had gone eerily silent. Conversations had died, glasses hovered mid-air, and all eyes were on him. Keanu wasn't one for theatrics, but there was a quiet intensity about him that was impossible to ignore. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "I couldn't help but notice you just turned that gentleman away. You said the restaurant is fully booked? The maître d' hesitated for the briefest moment, then gave a practiced nod. Unfortunately, we have no available tables this evening. That's strange because I see at least 4 tables open right now. Are they reserved? The maître d' visibly tensed. He hadn't expected to be questioned, especially not by a man like Keanu Reeves. He quickly glanced at the tables in question, then back at Keanu. Yes. Those tables are being held for guests arriving shortly. Keanu folded his arms. I see. And how come those guests didn't need a reservation in advance, but he does? He nodded toward the man who had stopped just before the door, watching the exchange with cautious interest. The restaurant patrons were shifting in their seats, whispering amongst themselves. The tension in the air had thickened, and the maître d' was now sweating slightly under the scrutiny. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He was caught, and he knew it. Keanu didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he turned and strode toward the man who had been turned away. "Excuse me, sir," he said warmly, extending a hand. "My name is Keanu. I'd be honored if you joined me for dinner." The man raised an eyebrow, surprised but appreciative. He looked at Keanu's outstretched hand, then at the maître d', who was now shifting uncomfortably. A slow smile spread across his face as he shook Keanu's hand. "Well, how could I say no to that?" Keanu turned back to the maître d' and gave him a knowing look. "Looks like we'll need a table for 2 after all. Unless, of course, you'd like to keep insisting that you're full." The maître d' swallowed hard. He knew there was no way out of this without looking worse than he already did. His entire reputation, perhaps even his job, was on the line. With a forced smile, he nodded. "Right this way, Mr. Reeves." The restaurant, still silent, watched in awe as Keanu and his new guest were led to one of the very tables that had supposedly been unavailable. The maître d' pulled out the chair with stiff, mechanical movements, his face flushed with embarrassment. Keanu thanked him politely and gestured for his guest to sit. "I never expected this," the man admitted as he took his seat, adjusting his suit jacket. "Honestly, I was just going to leave quietly. Happens more than you'd think." Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "It happens too often, and too many people just let it slide." "Not tonight." The waiter approached, still a bit shaken by what had just happened, but professional enough to regain his composure. "Can I get you gentlemen something to drink?" he asked. Keanu glanced at his guest, allowing him to order first. "A glass of red wine, please," the man said. Keanu smiled. "Make it 2, and bring us the best dish on the menu. I have a feeling we're about to have a great meal." As the waiter left, conversation slowly started back up around the restaurant, but there was a different energy in the air. Something had changed. People were looking at Keanu with newfound admiration. A few even nodded respectfully in his direction, but Keanu wasn't doing this for attention. He wasn't making a scene to be a hero. He was simply doing what was right. And as he sat back in his chair, clinking glasses with his new dinner companion, he knew that this night was about more than just a meal. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter how uncomfortable it made others. Because that's just the kind of man Keanu Reeves is. As Keanu and his new dinner companion settled into their seats, the energy in the restaurant remained charged. Though conversations resumed, eyes continued to dart toward their table. Some guests whispered among themselves, others exchanged nods of approval, and a few even lifted their glasses in silent acknowledgement of what had just transpired. Keanu, however, remained unfazed. He wasn't looking for validation, nor was he interested in the stares. He simply smiled at his guest, offering him the menu. "Well, what looks good to you?" The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Reeves." "Keanu," he corrected with a friendly grin. The man nodded. "Keanu, then. I never expected to be sitting here tonight. After what happened at the door, I figured I'd be grabbing takeout somewhere instead." Keanu leaned back, his eyes warm with sincerity. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it? You shouldn't have to expect that kind of treatment. No one should." The man took a deep breath, considering Keanu's words. "Yeah," he admitted, "but it happens, more often than people realize." Their conversation was briefly interrupted as the waiter returned, setting down their glasses of wine. "Your meals will be out shortly," he informed them with a small nod before hurrying away, still visibly affected by the night's events. Keanu took a sip of his wine, studying his dinner companion. "If you don't mind me asking, what do you do?" The man smiled. "I'm a writer. Novels. Mostly. But I dabble in journalism from time to time." Keanu's eyebrows lifted with interest. "A storyteller, huh? Now I'm even more glad we met. The world needs good stories," the writer chuckled. "That's what I tell myself every time I stare at a blank page." A blank page. Before they could continue, the maitre d' reappeared, his expression carefully neutral. But there was something different now. An unease, a forced humility. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Reeves, I wanted to apologize for the earlier misunderstanding." Keanu set his glass down, meeting the man's gaze. "A misunderstanding." His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable weight behind his words. The maitre d' shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, I regret if we gave the wrong impression." The writer chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "You didn't give the wrong impression. You gave the exact impression you intended to." The maitre d' flinched slightly but quickly composed himself. "Aye, of course. Again, I apologize." Keanu simply nodded. "Apologies are a start, but making sure it doesn't happen again, that's what really matters." The maitre d' swallowed hard, then gave a quick nod before retreating. Keanu sighed, turning back to his companion. "Think he got the message?" The writer smirked. "He got it. Whether he changes, that's another story." Their meals arrived, a beautifully plated dish of steak and roasted vegetables for Keanu, and a grilled salmon entree for his guest. As they ate, their conversation deepened. They spoke about storytelling, about society, about the quiet battles people face every day. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft hum of the restaurant and the clinking of silverware, Keanu knew he had made a small difference. Maybe not a world-changing act, but an important one nonetheless. Because sometimes standing up for someone in a single moment of injustice is enough to inspire change in ways you never expect. For Keanu Reeves, that was always worth doing. As the evening continued, the tension that had once filled the restaurant began to dissipate. Conversations returned to their normal hum, and the clinking of silverware against fine china filled the air. But despite the return to normalcy, a subtle shift had occurred. People were more aware, their gazes lingering just a little longer, their whispers carrying a tone of respect rather than idle gossip. Keanu and his dinner companion, the writer, continued their conversation, diving into topics both light and heavy. They discussed movies, books, and the state of the world, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Tonight wasn't just about conversation, it was about something deeper. It was about making a statement, even in the smallest of ways. As their plates were cleared, the waiter returned, carrying a bottle of the restaurant's finest wine. He set it down with a small, almost nervous smile. "This is on the house," he said, a token of appreciation for, well, for everything. Keanu chuckled, exchanging a glance with his new friend. "I appreciate the gesture," he said, "but I'd rather see real change than free wine." The waiter's expression turned serious. "I think you've already started that change, sir." Keanu nodded, accepting the bottle, but knowing that true change required more than just one moment in one restaurant. Still, if this night had planted a seed in even a few people's minds, then it was worth it. As they finished their drinks, the writer leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "You know," he said, "this story is going to stick with me, not just because of what happened, but because of what it means." Keanu smiled. "That's the power of a good story. It lingers." The writer chuckled. "You ever think about writing your own?" Keanu considered it for a moment, then shook his head. "I think I'd rather live them." With that, he signaled for the check. But before he could reach for his wallet, the writer placed a hand on his arm. "Allow me," he said. "Consider it my way of saying thanks." Keanu hesitated for a brief moment before nodding in appreciation. "All right, but next time, it's on me." As they stood to leave, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath once more. Some patrons offered small nods of respect. Others whispered to their companions. But one thing was clear. This night had left an impression. Before stepping out into the cool Los Angeles night, Keanu turned back toward the maitre d'. Their eyes met, and for the first time there was something different in the man's gaze, a mix of humility and reflection. "I'll make sure it doesn't happen again," Keanu said simply. "Not just because I was here, but because it's the right thing to do." The maitre d' nodded slowly. "Understood, sir." With that, Keanu and his new friend stepped outside, the sounds of the city washing over them. The writer took a deep breath, then turned to Keanu. "You know, I think this is one of those nights I'll have to write about." Keanu grinned. "Good. People need to hear it." They shook hands, parting ways, but the weight of the night lingered in the air. And as Keanu Reeves walked down the street, blending into the crowd like any other man, one thing was clear. He wasn't just a movie star. He was a reminder that standing up for what's right, even in the smallest moments, can change the world in ways you never expect. If you enjoyed this story and believe more people should hear about the real-life heroism of Keanu Reeves, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories. Let's spread the message that kindness, respect, and standing up for others can make a real difference in the world. See you next time.